Hello, all. I realize that in my reviews of science fiction TV shows, I haven't done a review of one of my absolute favorites, and that is Space 1999 from 1977 and 1978. Um, it developed, and this is a little bit interesting how the show developed. Originally, there was going to be another series of Gerry Anderson's show UFO, which had done very well in the ratings in the United States because it was broadcast right after All in the Family, and or before, I'm sorry, before All in the Family, and people would tune in on I think it was Saturday nights to watch All in the Family, but they'd watch UFO beforehand, so the ratings were quite well. Unfortunately, after All in the Family went on a summer hiatus, people seemed to stop watching, um, and the ratings went down considerably. But meanwhile, Anderson and his team, including some of his special effects designers, Mike Trim and Derek Meddings, and Brian Johnson had gone on to start sketches and doing some preliminary outlines for an updated UFO. One of the things Lou Grade had said to Anderson at that time was Lou Grade was the head of ITC television. I don't want to see any more shows where people are quote unquote having tea in the Midlands. Noted that American audiences liked the episodes that took place entirely on Moonbase more than episodes that I particularly liked, but they didn't. That showed the cost of running Shadow on Ed Straker's personal life. You know, he lost his marriage, he lost his son, he lost his wife, he lost best friends. You know, it cost him really. He couldn't even have really a relationship without worrying that the person he was going out with was a spy, as shown in the responsibility seat. But they wanted to do more episodes that were set on Moonbase, so he started designing an expanded Moonbase, and they had new vehicles and new weapons, and they were going to have the aliens decide that the Earth was too hard to defend because of the skydivers and the Earth defenses like the Shadow mobiles and the radar stations. So they were just going to concentrate their attacks on the moon. Well, Lou Grade wasn't satisfied with that entirely either. He said, "Well, you could still come back to Earth and you could still have people, sitting around having tea. I don't want that." So Anderson said, "Well, what if I do this? What if I blow the moon out of the Earth's orbit and it's hurled off into space, and now there can't be any shows on Earth?" And he said, "Okay, I like that. Let's develop it and see what you can come up with." Um, well, about midway into the development, Lou Grade looked at some of the preliminary ideas. Originally, it was going to be aliens that attacked the moon. Then it was going to be something else, and they had like a couple of different ideas that are being kicked around by the writers on the series, mostly Johnny Byrne and Christopher Penfield, and who was the overall story editor. And he didn't really like any of them. And so finally, he said at one point, "Why don't you just do a new show?" And he said, "But we've built all these sets, we've got all these sketches and things." He said, "Well, go ahead, use them, incorporate them into the new show. But I don't want UFO season 2. I want a new show, new series." So that developed into Space 1999, where and the concept is that there had been a strange series of magnetic anomalies on the moon, and they were causing some sort of a bizarre sort of virus that was killing the astronauts that were supposed to go on something called the Meta probe. They were going to launch a probe to an alien planet named Meta, and it never happened because all the astronauts died mysteriously of some sort of radiation poisoning, but it wasn't any radiation that the Moonbase personnel, including their chief medical officer, Dr. Helena Russell, played by Barbara Bain, could detect. It was up then to the commander of the Moonbase Alpha, who was Commander John Koenig, played by Martin Landau, to figure out what was going on and why these people were dying and what was happening. Well, by the time they figured it out, it was sort of too late. There was some sort of bizarre electromagnetic anomaly, and it caused one of their nuclear waste dumps to explode. Now, a lot of people get antsy and picky about what happened next. Famously, Isaac Asimov said that any explosion that was powerful enough to knock the moon out of the Earth's orbit would actually destroy the moon completely, and that was ridiculous. And people pointed out, nuclear waste is not fissile; it can't explode. well, if you take those things into stride, and if you're willing to suspend your disbelief for the sense of the story, it was actually quite a good series for the time. It was more mature, more interesting, and much better done than quite a number of other series that were out. And you got to remember this is 1977, before Star Wars was released, and there were some really terrific special effects. One of the things I particularly liked was their weapons. They had a laser gun or they referred to it as a stun gun, that was small, and it could fit in the palm of your hand, and had four small barrels, and it had four different settings. I believe those were stun, kill, destroy, and heat, which were similar to the settings of the original phaser in Star Trek. But they had this very neat looking little weapon. It was small, and it would fit in your hand. I thought that was nice. And the other neat device they had was a device called the Comlock, which was your own personal sort of identification that fit on your belt. And it had a thing that would open doors, but only when it recognized your face. It had a video screen. And it's very neat that the way they did that. Very ingenious, I thought. There was only one actual operational Comlock, which had a small television monitor installed into it, and on the end was a cable hookup. And when they were showing someone using the Comlock to show their face or something else on the screen, they would hook up that one operational Comlock to the cable and shoot the scene so that the person's hands blocked off the cable so you couldn't see it. So it looked like everybody really had an operational working Comlock. That must have taken quite a lot of time to shoot those scenes because you had to go from one person to another. But it was worth it because the effect looks terrific. And by the way, there are replicas now that you can get of those, the Comlock and the stun gun, which I may eventually, when I get some money, end up purchasing. The other great thing that they had was their vehicles. The main vehicle of Moonbase Alpha was the Eagle, which was both a transporter and a rescue ship and a cargo hauler. They had a combat version. They had a version that had added boosters, which helped break away from certain planets. And really a very terrific design. Unlike some of the earlier vehicles, I believe in Gerry Anderson shows, a lot of like the Interceptor, the only thing that they built was actually the cockpit. And that's true of the Skydiver as well, the Sky One. They built the cockpit. They didn't build anything else. Everything else was, a model or matte painting. So in this, I believe they built one actual full-sized operational Eagle. At least I know they built the cockpit, and I'm pretty sure they built one interior too, because the interior shots look terrific. The cockpit looks very functional. It looks like an aircraft, not like some futuristic Flash Gordon kind of machine. It looks practical, and the special effects done by Brian Johnson are just fantastic. I'm not going to go over every single episode, but I am going to highlight some of the ones that I particularly liked and talk a little bit about them. Not too much. I don't want to give spoilers for people who haven't seen the series. The entire series in high definition is available on YouTube, and I highly recommend watching them if you haven't seen them. The acting is terrific. The special effects are terrific. The costumes by Rudy Gernreich, a very well-known fashion designer, are very good. And I will say that I believe the first season is superior. The first season was produced and mainly directed by Gerry Anderson himself. Produced by Gerry Anderson, I should say. They had different directors for each episode. But the second episode, the series, because, again, Space 1999 was popular in the U.S., they brought in a U.S. producer, and unfortunately, they brought in Fred Freiberger, the guy who basically ruined Star Trek. Fred Freiberger knew absolutely freaking nothing about science fiction. And if you don't believe me, watch the movie The Beginning of the End, a movie about giant locusts. Well, anybody who knows high school science knows that about the squared cube law. If you square the size, you cube the weight. So giant locusts would be crushed to death by their own endoskeletons. Stupid. It's a stupid movie. And anyway, they brought in Fred because they wanted an American perspective. He kept changing his mind about things, and that becomes evident in the series. First, he said, "I want to see a monster every week," and they were like, "What?" They said, "I want to see more monsters. You're not showing enough monsters." So they put together all these, monsters and fancy, strange uniforms and strange costumes. And then later on, he said, "What's all these monsters? Where's the plot? I want more plot." So they started writing more interesting plots. There are some good episodes on Series 2, and I will highlight those. For Series 1, obviously the first one, Breakaway, is terrific because it gives you the whole setup of what happens to the moon and what's happening with the astronauts, and what happens. It implies that there are terrible earthquakes and things which would happen if the moon broke out of our orbit. Or terrible effects on Earth. It causes all kinds of disasters. And the next one, second episode actually, is called Force of Life. Is really creepy. A sort of green globe hovers over one of the nuclear generator sections of Alpha, and it sort of infects one of their workers, and he starts acting strange, and it starts like he's going to release the safety controls on this nuclear generator, and it's going to create a chaos. And that's kind of an interesting episode. The War Games was interesting, where Alpha is apparently attacked by Earth vehicles, and this is the first time they reveal that there's a battle version of the Eagle called the Hawk, which looks different, and they're just a weapons ship, and that was those models I thought were terrific. And it's later revealed that these people are just kind of playing a mind trick on them. Nothing actually really happened that they thought happened. It was just sort of a test by these aliens who didn't want them to come to their planet because they thought humans were too belligerent, and this was the test that proved they were too belligerent. Alpha Child is a very creepy, weird episode where the first child born on Alpha matures from like an infant into a 5-year-old in like 5 seconds, and the mother freaks out, won't even talk to him. The kid is deaf and dumb, which is kind of a strange plot twist, but we find out why. And again, there's a big twist in that. I won't give it away because I think you should watch it. It's really good. Very interesting ending as well. The one that people seem to remember more than any other episode of season 1, myself included, is the very frightening, very well done Dragon's Domain. Briefly, Dragon's Domain is about a astronaut named Tony Cellini who was supposed to head a probe to an extraterrestrial planet called Ultra. And somewhere along as they get into orbit of Ultra, they realize there's this kind of graveyard of ships and orbiting Ultra, and they decide there's one of them that has an airlock that seems like it's compatible with the Ultra probe. And so they go and they link up with the ship, and the minute they get inside the ship, they are attacked by this horrific monster that has psychic power. It can hypnotize people, and it's this horrible, sort of octopus, squid, monster, dragon thing that pulls people into its fiery maw and spits out these gore-caked, burned skeletons. That scared the living crap out of me, and I was 18 when I saw this. I wasn't a kid. I can't imagine how badly it would have scared children if we saw that. But they really did a terrific job on those effects. It was really horrific. And now he thinks it's come back, the monster. And nobody would believe him at the time because his flight data recorder didn't record any of the events that he knew had happened. And that's an interesting psychological episode. Really, really good. Another great episode, Mission of the Darians, which starred Joan Collins, was a very frightening sort of dystopian episode about the lengths that a somewhat sophisticated society would go to preserve itself. Again, I'm not going to give too much away. You should watch that. That's a really good episode. Black Sun is a good episode with a good Victor Bergman. Victor Bergman was a character played by Barry Morse, only for season 1. Apparently he was not available for season 2, or he had started to become ill and he wasn't available to film season 2. They never really explain his disappearance. I think there's an episode where there's mention made that he went onto the lunar surface without a space helmet, which makes absolutely no sense because he was their science officer and he wouldn't do something that stupid. Or his helmet had become ruptured, I think. End of Eternity is a great, creepy, scary episode about this really awful, vicious alien who they let out of a kind of a prison asteroid, and it has some disastrous results. Another Time, Another Place is an interesting kind of a parallel history, parallel world episode. This is one where British English and American English are very different in a lot of ways. And one of the characters in this is named, they say her name is Regina. Well, in American English, we'd say Regina. We wouldn't say Regina. But they put emphasis on different things in British English. Then I noticed in an episode of my favorite episode of UFO, The Man Who Came Back, there's a scene where they have to launch to SID via NASA. They can't do it with their own facilities. And everything was fine for me until somebody said, one of the technicians said, it was doing a check, he said, this is fine, oxygen fine. So telemetry, that's a Britishism. Americans say telemetry. And again, that's a bit of a giveaway there that the actor was actually British, not American. But anyway, that's a diversion. Another good episode, The Last Sunset, where aliens actually give the moon an atmosphere for a short period of time. Again, it's sort of a way of getting them to stay away from their own planet, because they figured if we give them what they want, then they won't have to come down here. Well, it doesn't work out the way you thought it would. The Infernal Machine is one of my absolute favorites because it stars one of my favorite British actors, the wonderful Leo McKern. If you have not seen Rumpole of the Bailey, you should, because he is just a fantastic actor. And in this one, he plays a kind of a curmudgeon who is in charge of an intelligent spacecraft, and he is dying, and the spacecraft wants to use Commander Koenig and or Dr. Russell, maybe possibly both, to become his new companion, as it were. And it doesn't work out that way. It's very, very good. Very kind of a sad episode. Interesting to see an alien that actually had no real physical being. It was this machine. It had become this machine. The Last Enemy is really good. It's a very kind of a strange episode where these alien women land in an enormous spacecraft, and the model of the spacecraft is gorgeous. Again, Brian Johnson did some fantastic modeling work, and I suspect that Mike Trim did some of the design on this too, because you could kind of tell his style. Just incredible. Anyway, there's these alien women, and they want to use Alpha as basically a weapons platform to attack a planet that's on the other side of their sun, so normally they can't attack it. But given the position that Alpha is in, for a few hours anyway, they can attack their enemy directly from Moonbase, and that has some consequences with their opponents, who are apparently all male. Again, interesting kind of war of the sexes literally there. A very beautiful actress, and I can't remember her name, who kind of seduces Koenig. If not actually, then, psychologically. And she's lying to him, of course. The Testament of Arcadia is a weird sort of flashback episode where they find a culture on a dead planet that's apparently was humanoid. Not only that, but their writing appears to be Sanskrit. And, Sanskrit was a Proto-European language. And it turns out that these people are progenitors. They seeded life on Earth, but they were the originals, and I thought that was kind of interesting. That has two people are kind of taken over, and they sort of hold Moonbase for hostage, and that has its own repercussions. Again, some very good episodes there. Season 2, like I said, it has some difficulties. They got rid of Barry Morse, like I said, couldn't come back. So they brought in Catherine Schell in the first episode, The Metamorph, which is a very good episode about a planet. Again, they discover a planet called Psychon, and its leader, mentor, played by the wonderful Brian Blessed, who is just good in everything that he does. He had that big blustery voice that I loved. Especially when he was in Flash Gordon, he was really good in that. But he, invites them down. He's being all friendly, and well, it turns out he has a very sinister ulterior motive. And his daughter Maya is played by the beautiful Catherine Schell, and she doesn't believe anything the Alphas are saying. She thinks her father is this wonderful scientist who's trying to revive the planet, which has been almost completely destroyed by apparently a very violent period of volcanism. And he is building this quote-unquote living computer called Psyche. Well, there's a very horrible secret to Psyche, and I won't give that away to people who haven't seen it. Um, Journey to Where is kind of an interesting episode. The moon base is contacted by human beings from the future, and they say that they have a transportation device where they can transport them to they all live in these enclosed cities now. There's no countryside anymore. Everybody lives in these like mega cities, which are inside domes, and they're going to transport them, and something goes wrong with the transportation system, and instead of being transported to the future, uh, I think it's Commander Koenig, Dr. Russell, and Alan Carter, the main Eagle pilot played by Nick Tate, are transported back to uh, early, about 16th century Scotland, directly before the Battle of Bannockburn. I thought that was kind of an interesting episode, and they have to figure out how to get them back. And Maya's very instrumental in that. A good Maya episode, I thought. One Moment of Humanity is kind of interesting. It's almost more like a Star Trek episode than Space 1999 in some of its themes. These very advanced people invite Alphans down to their planet, and they're treating them very well. They have sort of like a Roman society with all kinds of very good food and drink and everything, but there's something sinister going on that we can't quite figure out. Again, I won't spoil that for Brian the Brain was an episode that started out as kind of a comedy episode. There's this sort of bizarre little computer that acts like it's kind of a goofy comedian, and it's being very friendly and wants to meet everybody on Alpha, and it's talking in this kind of funny voice. And it turns out that it has a very sinister motivation, and that there's really nothing funny about it at all. It's a very strange, creepy, funny, interesting episode. Uh, the Mark of Arcanon, they discover a hidden chamber beneath the moon. And in this chamber are two humanoid beings. And there's a strange sort of mark that's like two diamonds crossed. And it's both on their foreheads and on the chamber. And they discover the mechanism that releases these kind of stasis chambers and open them and take the two from the unconscious humans. One's a young boy and the other one's an older man, up to Moonbase and revive them in the medical center, and that has some interesting consequences too. Um, Seed of Destruction was interesting in that it's about a asteroid that has a kind of material or crystal on it, which is actually alive, and it takes over an astronaut who is sent down in an Eagle to examine the planet, and it it's Koenig actually who's sent down to explore and it kind of creates an opposite of him, a duplicate, a mirror image. Literally, there's a mirror, and you see the image in the mirror come alive and step out of the mirror. A little bit of Alice in Wonderland there, and that's a really good episode, I thought, also. And again, the aliens don't really seem to have any sort of physical form. They're more a psychic force of some sort. Very good, very well-written episode, some decent special effects. The AB Chrysalis is one of my favorites. It's almost nonsensical in some of its premises, but it's interesting, it's well acted, it's sort of strange, and again, you have these very bizarre aliens who don't really seem to have a very clear motivation as to why they want to communicate with the Alphans, but really, I thought really very good episode. Interesting, atmospheric, strange, kind of sexy in one way too. Dorzak is an episode where it is discovered on an alien planet that there is another living Psychon. And it's Dorzak, who was a poet who Maya is familiar with, and they revive him, and thinking he's this, intellectual giant, and it turns out again he's got something of an evil motive, and he can influence people's minds. He can kind of hypnotize people with his superior mental powers, and he's using them for ill, and that gets Maya very upset and pits them against each other, and that's kind of an interesting episode too. He forces her to give him the secret of transform. Maya is a metamorph. She can transform into any other animal or living being that she has examined closely enough. And he forces her to give him that power, and that has some interesting and frightening consequences. The Devil's Planet is It's kind of an inconsequential episode, but I really like it because it has sort of a strange, almost like an S&M quality to it. There's this planet of, there are two planets. There's a planet that's sort of a female-run dictatorship, a matriarchal society, and there's another planet that's sort of supposedly a prison planet, but the truth is, when anybody is sent to this planet, they step out of a transporter and onto the planet's surface, and they instantly die because the atmosphere is poisonous to their life form. Anyway, it's not poisonous to human beings, but the Alphans discover this planet and they land on it, and they are captured, and they have all these, like I said, there's sort of an S&M feel to it. They're all these like gorgeous women with whips, and they act in a very dominant manner, and it's very strange. But again, I thought it was good. It's not one of the best episodes in truth, but I particularly like it. I thought it was very well done. Um, the Immunity Syndrome, and that's the only episode that actually has the same title as an episode of Star Trek, though the plots are completely different. And that's kind of interesting about a planet that sort of has a will of its own, but you never really learn what it is or what the force behind what's going on the planet is. It's just sort of attacks everybody, and we don't really know why. Again, fairly decent, well directed, well written episode. I think Johnny Byrne wrote that one. He's a really good writer. Let's see, what else did I write here? Oh, probably one of the best of season 2 is the Dorcons, because it introduces the fact that the Psychons had an enemy, and the enemy were known as the Dorcons, and they hunted the Psychons because they found out that if they had a fairly long life cycle, but they found out that if one transplanted the brainstem of a Psychon into a Dorcon, it made them immortal. And there's the leader of their this particular group, who's played by Patrick Troughton, who was the second Doctor on Doctor Who, is dying, and he wants to use Maya's brainstem to recreate, to make himself immortal. He has a rival in this younger Dorcon who basically just wants him to die so he can take over the position of Archon. The leader is called the Archon. That's interesting. The term Archon is a Greek term, I think, which would refer to a high priest. So that's kind of an interesting use of that term. And he also has a female companion who wants him to. She doesn't trust the young guy. She thinks he's too impetuous and would not make a good leader. Well, he starts playing the Alphans against each other. He starts playing coding against these other two, saying, "Oh, they're the evil ones. I'm good." And he lets them out from when they were going to imprison him, and he says, "I'll help you rescue Maya." Well, he's lying, and he wants Maya's brainstem, but he's going to preserve it until he's old. And inadvertently, Koenig helps him destroy Patrick Troughton. And again, I'm not going to spoil it completely and tell you what the ending is. I just thought it was interesting that they introduced the fact that the Psychons had an enemy, an ancient enemy who would hunt them relentlessly, apparently. And there's some interesting spaceships, some really good model effects in that one as well, and explosions and things. Gerry Anderson was always big on explosions. Again, good production values, good, really great special effects for the time. And even now, they hold up. And, the Eagles were fantastic. The lasers were fantastic. The comm locks, the spacesuits all looked, interesting and realistic. They're not exaggerated. And, I thought it was really good. It got a lot of bad press, sort of like I said, when it came out, because people were in kind of a thing about they like to compare everything to Star Trek and say, "Oh, it's not as good as Star Trek." Well, I don't think that even Roddenberry would have liked that. I don't think he created Star Trek as a show that was supposed to be better than anything else. It was just his particular vision. I don't think he would poo-poo other people's visions, and that seems like what Star Trek fans were doing to Space 1990 when it came out. And I know because I was there. was 18 when it came out, and I heard the kind of comments people made, oh, it's stupid, and, it looks cheesy, and blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't think any of that is true, and I think it's held up particularly well, and I highly recommend that you watch it.